Hi everybody, I'm Bree the Plant Lady, checking in with part 2 of my October tour here at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum in Raleigh, North Carolina. I just got done doing a fun talk all about fragrant trees and shrubs, and I kept referencing all these plants that are planted here at the Arboretum. One specifically, that fabulous weeping tree behind me, is Bridal Veil Prunus mume, which of course I have at my garden as well. Theirs is significantly larger and more appropriately planted. But I thought I would start here on the terrace because in many of the other garden tours that I've done here, I haven't shown this area off. So let me go ahead and turn this camera around so that you can see everything that is growing here. Well, I have to start here at perhaps one of the most impressive trees for bark interest. This is Cornus wilsoniana white jade, and it's a gigantic growing dogwood that is multi-trunked and has that great mottled bark. And you can see it's much larger than the native dogwood Cornus florida. Really a great shade tree option that gives you year-round interest. Of course, at the base of that is another wonderful drought-tolerant aspidistra. This is Asahi. I've always loved this plant because it gets that white tip that actually comes from lack of fertility. If you give it too much fertilizer, the leaves will go all green. So super low maintenance, deer don't eat it, doesn't need to be irrigated, grows in dry shade, awesome plant. Well, I actually featured Conifers trifoliata in today's talk with some warning, but I did want to show it to all of you. I don't grow this at home. It is a hardy citrus. This is half of that hardy citrus that I show from my garden. This is Conifers trifoliata flying dragon, and it's got these great contorted green branches. It's super thorny, really like devastatingly thorny, and I included it in my talk because it sets fabulous flowers in the spring that are very fragrant, followed by the fruit that are starting to form right now, and they color up. The problem is they fall off, and this is exactly why I don't want this at my house, and I don't really recommend it to people. All those fruit will germinate, and then you get a thicket of super thorny seedlings underneath. And this could potentially fall into the invasives category. So I don't like to promote invasive plants. That's why I wanted to make sure that I shared this up close and live experience with all of you as a warning about the flying dragon. Well, now I'm about to enter the area of the Arboretum that makes you question if you're actually in North Carolina. And this is the Scree garden. And it is full of treasures. Many plants I'm not super familiar with, but look at this Viburnum ovatum Ralston hardy. This is actually introduced by the Ralston Arboretum. It's in full bloom right now, middle of October, full sun. We've got Helianthus. I think this is Helianthus angustifolius. Again, I don't like making assumptions when I'm here because the diversity represented in this garden far exceeds my general plant knowledge. Really, I'm always so intrigued. Look at this wax myrtle. So this is actually a North Carolina native, and this is a dwarf selection. I don't see the label. Yes, there it is. Is it? Yeah, Morella cerifera, strawberry shortcake. That is the southern wax myrtle, but a dwarf variety. I really would like to have that. And I need that. You know, I usually think of wax myrtles for wet, but here it's being utilized in a full sun, very dry condition, which would be really great for my full sun native borders where I've had to pull out so many of the plants because I couldn't keep it wet enough. So, very inspired to try and find that plant. Also nice to see a phlomis there. And I'm assuming this is some sort of orangium. Although, again, when I don't see a label here, I don't want to make any assumptions. Look at this great salvia. I guess this is a hybrid. It kind of looks like a microphylla. This is Church Road. You see lots of different pollinators on it, different bees and skippers and kinds of different creatures gathering nectar. These tend to have kind of a widespread woody form. They aren't always that pretty in the winter, but they're worth growing because they flower all summer and they're super drought tolerant. I am a sucker for good signage, and I really appreciate this. Don't leaf confused. So some of these Xeric plants are really hard to distinguish, and because I don't work with Xeric plants at all, I'm not sure that I would fully know the difference between a Nalina, a Dazzlerian, Hesper aloe, even a yucca, agave, a mangave can all be confusing. So I love when public gardens have good educational signage. And behind that is a fabulous pineapple guava, which I have 2 of that need to get planted. And I'm just gonna pan out here, and I'm doing this more for myself than anybody to remember that it gets big. It gets really big. It's a multi-stem, small tree, every bit 20 foot wide. So Bree, don't plant this with 4-foot centers. Speaking of agave, this is a pretty impressive stand. You can see all of the pups coming up at the base. This is agave salmiana, and it is a Mexican native. Really cool. Now, speaking of plant ID, so we've got yucca there. We have manfreda, which is half of what a mangave is. Remember, mangaves are manfreda and agave, an intergeneric hybrid. And then here, this taller plant is Hesper aloe funifera. And then we come over here and we have agave striata variety striata. So just within a few feet of one another, they have all of these genera represented with great signage. So the Ralston Arboretum is just a place for the best continuing education. Now, this is not a plant palette that I'm gonna try and emulate on my swamp adjacent property, but there's elements of this that I need to apply with more regularity. I'm not going to include agaves in my garden. I am really clumsy. I don't need plants that will impale me. However, I could definitely include more plants like Orangium that have these great structures. And I really probably should consider growing more Dazzlerian, which is what we have here. And the nice thing with this is it's not thorny on the tips. So though it does have thorns along the leaves, they aren't necessarily going to send you to the hospital. What my borders are really missing is this kind of texture and structure. And so I'm very specifically looking in this garden to try and come up with some new plants for me to consider adding realistically next spring to make those front borders a bit more interesting. Now I'm literally looking on the other side of the pathway, and we have a totally different plant palette. Here we have the great native Magnolia macrophylla variety Ashii. And then here we have a collection of deciduous conifers. So we have Taxodium right here, which is another great native. And we have Pseudolarix, which is another one of my favorites, which I also have growing at home. And these are deciduous conifers, meaning they lose their leaves in the fall and then they leaf back out in the spring. That's what they're supposed to do. On the other side here, we have Metasequoia, which is another deciduous conifer. So these are the 3 primary deciduous conifers that do best here in the southeast US. Larix, also known as larch, is another deciduous conifer, but it really doesn't thrive in the heat of the southeast. That's more of a western plant. Now here is a plant that I definitely need to get, Bescheneria, and I'm so appreciative to see that it is reliably hardy, growing very well here in quite a bit of shade, literally at the base of a metasequoia. Now Bescheneria have the look and form of an agave or a yucca, but no points whatsoever. They're very soft. I really like how they look. And this is the kind of texture that I'm really aiming to have as I continue to build out new beds. Well, I saw a flash of some butterflies, and of course, it's because of the Turk's cap. And I have the pink variety. This is the traditional red. And it is such a reliable plant for pollinators. Hummingbirds love it. It gets really big though, as you can see, and though this is often a dieback shrub for us, it's still a wide, big plant. So keep that in mind if you're gonna be planting Malvaviscus anywhere. I don't think I've ever given enough credit to how interesting this garden is, just to show you a wide view. Every corner is interesting, and what I really appreciate is, you know, there's great flowering stuff. That's asparagus, a species of asparagus. It's very drought tolerant, probably native to South Africa. And then we have palms, and look at all the seeds on this palm. And then here we've got agave perii, variety hutuensis. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. That palm, by the way, is Sable Minor variety Louisiana. So a native palm that I need to have. Gosh, there's so many plants I need to have. So little time. As I make my way up here, you can see some Muhlenbergia, but this is not the traditional Muhlenbergia capillaris. I believe this is Muhlenbergia lindheimeri, but I'm going to confirm that. This might be pink flamingo. Let's find the label. It is. So it's a hybrid called pink flamingo, and it's obviously much taller than the traditional Muhlenbergia capillaris. I really love this grass because of its larger stature, also because the flowers are on these long pendulous stems. They make for really great cuts. Bit easier to cut for flower arrangements compared to the straight species Muhlenbergia capillaris. Now you probably don't think about ferns when you think of dry xeric conditions, but here's a great example. I actually don't know how to say it. Pleopeltis bombacina probably. But this is obviously a fern. It has fur, which usually indicates drought tolerance. It's growing in the scree condition in part shade. Well, this is an exciting scene. This is Morea polysticha, and it's a beautiful iris relative. It is in full bloom right now in October, which isn't usually the time that you would think about irises blooming. So again, you see it's growing in permatil. This is literally a scree garden, scree meaning made of screenings. And it's pretty amazing how plants perform in this sort of condition compared to native soil. The drainage is really a critical component to it, and it also heats up and you get a real microclimate. Who knows whether this is zone 8 or zone 9, but there's some serious zone bending being accomplished with this kind of landscape. Well, everybody, I hope you have enjoyed this installation of the scree and xeric gardens here at the JC Ralston, and I hope you'll tune in tomorrow to see more areas of the garden. As always, thanks so much for watching, and happy gardening.